So you look at, we're on lesson 175. There's 27 lessons in that book. It's 340 pages. So my long-term goal, and this is one of the reasons why I'm taking my time on this stuff, is to get all of this stuff in print like this so that it can be available to the body of Christ in this fashion. So I have with me this morning 10 copies of this. They're $20 if you want to pick one up. They're on the table back there. I do want to read a couple things here. I gave a few, so there's some dedications or thank yous or what have you in the front. So the front page says, the notes found in the book are designed to be used in conjunction with the King James Bible. The following notes were taught to the Saints of Grace Life Bible Church in Grand Rapids, Michigan between September 13, 2015 and April 17, 2016. The purpose of this project has been to set forth our belief that the King James Bible is God's Word for English-speaking people. Our goal has been to enunciate a position on the final authority of the King James Bible that is scriptural, reasonable, factual, and historically accurate. The notes presented herein are the edited course notes that were distributed to the participants when the lessons were originally taught. As of the publication of the present volume, the class is still being taught. To access the video and audio, etc., it tells you how to do that. And then there's also a little note in the front of it that says, I would like to thank Sylvia and Mike Erspalmer for their assistance every week in proofreading the notes. Many thanks also are in order to the Saints of the Adult Sunday School class at Grace Life Bible Church. Without your interest and support, this class would not have been possible. So this is available. I'm turning around right away, hopefully by the end of the month, and getting the second volume in the works. It's bulleted. It's just like the notes. It's basically, there's been light editing, light revision. I decided to move forward with this, even in this format though, because if it's going to take me going back and re-editing all this stuff to read like a narrative, this will never happen. I just don't have enough time in my life to accomplish that. But anyway, the goal is to get the whole thing in this format here before the rapture or before I die, whichever happens first. Hopefully the rapture, of course. But that's available now. If you are online, I'm going to put a link to the description in this video for where you can order that direct from the publisher. In about another week or two, there will also be a Kindle version of it available on Amazon, but they're still working on finishing that. So if you want to pick one of these up, those of you that are in-house, they're $20. I got 10 of them with me this morning. I have 40 total, but I'm bringing 40 with me to Chicago at the end of the month for the Pastors Conference. I'll sell them. I'd have to bring more next week, but just so you're aware of that. If you want to buy one off the website, you can order at the link that I'll have in the description later today for that. So we have in front of us now lesson 175, the pre-1611 evidence for the text, BOD 1602, impact of the BOD 1602 on King James New Testament readings. So if you just get into the notes here, the review will make it pretty self-explanatory where we're at with this study. Since lesson 171, we have been looking at the primary work in progress documents. No, that's right, document known as BOD 1602. Thus far, we have been considering the following regarding BOD 1602. Now, just a brief reminder, BOD 1602 is this document right here that is depicted on the Bodleian Library website. It is a 1602 Bishop's Bible with the handwritten notes of the translators interlinear and in the margin. This picture is from 2 Chronicles 17, and again, you can see the notations here, the crossing out of words, the insertion of other text, as they literally are using a 1602 Bible to conform it, revise it into what would ultimately be a King James Bible. Okay? So thus far, we have been considering the following regarding BOD 1602. We talked about scholarly awareness and published access in lesson 162. We talked about the physical description and contents in lesson 171. And then we talked about the impact on King James Old Testament readings in lessons 172, 73, and 74. So now today we're going to start talking about the New Testament section of this document, right? So today in lesson 175, we want to look at the New Testament annotations found in BOD 1602. In doing so, we will be utilizing the coming of the King James Gospels a collation of the translator's work in progress by Ward S. Allen and Edward C. Jacobs. That is this book right here. I know the cover is not great. In fact, it's quite hideous in my opinion. But anyway, this was done in 1995, and this is a collation of Bod 1602 for the Gospels, for the annotated sections of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John that are annotated in Bod 1602. All right. As far as the discussion goes, or scholarly awareness and access to the document, short of going to the Bodleian library yourself and sitting there with the actual document yourself, this is the closest that you're probably going to get to being able to see what the readings were, how they were conforming the bishop's Bible. So we're going to be following closely here the work of Allen and Jacobs in this book. Now you can buy this online. This particular book, I don't know how much it is anymore. I bought it probably 5-6 years ago when we started this class. And I don't even remember what I paid for it. And it's kind of been sitting around until now, and I've been using it a lot. So that's the way things go with some of the books I buy, I suppose. But let's get right into the first point. The Bod 1602 New Testament section is the first main point, okay? So the New Testament portion of Bod 1602 is not as heavily annotated throughout as is the Old Testament, okay? So it's not as heavily annotated in the New as it was in the Old. But remember what we're looking at when we look at this document, all right? We are looking at, remember these were all originally unbound sheets. At some point they were gathered up and they were bound together in Bod 1602. Certain parts of the Bible had more annotations than others. So when we look at the New Testament section, it's not as heavily annotated throughout as was the Old Testament, all right? As previously noted in Lesson 171, there are significant portions of the New Testament of Bod 1602 that possess 0 annotations. The New Testament annotations found in Bod 1602 represent the work of the Oxford New Testament Company that worked on the Gospels. Allen and Jacobs comment as follows, quote, "The New Testament annotations, I believe, fill margins and text in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Except for 5 annotations scattered in the epistles, there are no other annotations." So when they published this book on the Gospels, the reason it's on the Gospels and not anything else is because it is the Gospels that are the most heavily annotated in Bod 1602. There are a few stray ones in a few different parts in the epistles, but by and large they are totally unannotated. Now, on the one hand, I find that a little bit frustrating, but when you think about that we already have the other document, Manuscript 98, that we've studied already in detail, and we know that Manuscript 98 was the work of the company that worked, the Second Westminster Company that worked on the New Testament epistles, we do have, through the work on Bod 1602 in the Gospels and Manuscript 98 for the epistles, we do have primary work in progress documents that speak to the majority of the New Testament, even though Bod 1602 is not as heavily annotated. So remember, we've looked at this document in the past. This is Manuscript 98, and here's the entry for 1 Corinthians 8, which is their actual this is the document produced by the Second Westminster Company. So if you're interested in that, you're going to want to go back to prior lessons, right? So, next point. 3 principal scribes using different methodologies are responsible for these notes. Quote, 3 principal scribes using different methodology recorded these annotations. Now I'm going to write this on the board so that we don't have to keep flipping back to this. The first scribe, handwriting, all right? The ML scribe, this would be Mark, Luke. The ML scribe uses by contrast a precise method to record annotation in Mark and in Luke. So he does all of Mark, and then he also so MT does Matthew and John 17. ML does Mark and Luke, but in Luke he only does chapters 1 through 18. All right. And then there's a third scribe, LJ. LJ does the rest of Luke. So this is the Luke John Scribe uses a method similar to ML's for annotating Luke 19. So this would be Luke 19 through 24, so the end portion of that, and then John 18 through 21. So if you're looking at the numbers here, you'll see some interesting things, all right? Number one, do we have a full book in Matthew that is totally annotated? Mm-hmm. Yes. Do we have a full book in Mark that is totally annotated? Do we have a full book in Luke that is totally annotated between two different scribes? And then we only have like the latter half, maybe less than half of John that is annotated. Chapter 17 by one scribe, and then chapters 18 through 21 by somebody else, okay? So there are three different scribes responsible for the annotations that are found in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Matthew, Mark, and Luke are annotated throughout. John is only annotated in chapter 17 through 21. The first portion of John has no annotations in it, and there's obviously no clear explanation for why that's the case, but that is the case when you look at the document, all right? So according to Allen and Jacobs, 3 stages of revision are visible in these annotations in the Gospels in Bod 1602. Quote, "The evidence which follows, handwriting, methods of annotation, and textual collation, argues that 3 scribes were responsible for recording the New Testament annotations. The evidence reveals, moreover, the presence of 3 causally related stages of translation which occurred between late 1607 and 1610. For convenience, these stages are here signified as stage 1. Okay, so S1, so we're going to say stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3. So there's 3 different stages that can be deduced by a study of the annotations here, all right? And that's from Allen and Jacobs, page 5, top of page 2. Allen and Jacobs surmise stage 1 as follows, quote, "Stage 1 revisions comprise the annotations recorded in the New Testament by scribes, perhaps some of the translators themselves, near the end of 1607 or early 1608. When in the course of the 7-year project, the Oxford New Testament Company had completed its assignment of translating the Gospels and preparing for that review of its work mandated by the rules observed in the translation of the Bible. Stage 1 revision falls into 3 subgroups of annotations." Okay, so they're saying that stage 1 occurs near the end of 1607. So stage 1 is completed by the end of 1607, early what?
1608.
1608. Is everybody with that? Okay? Now, there are 3 things that are going to be indicative of this here, okay? And I don't know how to write this down because I'm probably going to have to write a bunch of other junk up here. But there are 3 things that happen. There are, number 1, substitutions. Substituting one word for what? Another word, okay? There are second additions, where they're adding what? Another word or something like that into the text. And there are 3 deletions. So there are 3 different types of changes or revisions that are occurring during stage 1. A substitution of a word, additions of words and phrases, or the deletions of words or phrases, or some combination of all 3 within a given verse. Sometimes there's a deleted phrase and a substitution along with an additional word. Sometimes there's just something deleted. Sometimes there's a substitution and nothing else. Sometimes there's an addition and nothing else, okay? So stage 1 is happening by the end of 1601, early 1608, and it is comprising at least 3 different types of revision on the part of the translators as they're working over the text, okay? Look at the next sentence. A substitution requires the scribe to cancel a given portion of a verse and record in its place a handwritten revision, either interlinearly, so you know what that means, right? Between the lines, right? Or in the margin. An addition requires the scribe to add phrasing to a portion of a verse, either interlinearly or in a margin. A deletion requires a scribe to cancel only a given portion of a verse. It is common to find all three subgroups used in a single verse. Like I just said, S1 revisions are clearly recognizable in the work of ML and LJ. So stage 1 is most clearly recognizable in ML's work and LJ's work, and there's a reason for that, because they are more meticulous and precise in how they are recording their revisions, which we'll talk about here in a minute, okay? S1 revisions are clearly recognizable in the work of ML and LJ, who use systematic methods to record revisions, but the unsystematic method of MT often makes it difficult to determine if his annotations belong to an S1 or S2 category. Okay, let's stop there. Does anybody have any questions or comments? So again, when we look at this, are we literally looking at them doing the translation work? And we will be able to demonstrate very clearly where there is revision upon revision occurring. In other words, they take it to the anvil once and they revise it. Then it comes back to the anvil again and it is further revised, and then possibly even a third time. We can see when we look at and make the comparisons. Okay? Does everyone understand that? Stage 2 is described thusly, quote, Stage 2 revisions make up a second stage of annotations. These representing the result of the review work of 1608, had been recorded in the New Testament after stage 1 work. So they are dating stage 2 to when? 1608. So stage 1 would be the company work. Then is the company work sent out to other people to review. Then they're going to record further revisions in 1608 based upon the review of other people, other companies, etc. are going to be recorded in stage 2. All right, let's go back to the notes. The process probably went thus. During or after the review of 1608, the Oxford Company met in 1608-1609 to discuss the suggested changes to their completed gospel revisions, those in the S1 category or stage 1. Those suggestions by the reviewers to which the company agreed were recorded by the three principal scribes aimed through their S1 revisions, canceling out earlier S1 revisions when necessary. At times, these S2 revisions revealed debate among the translators. Furthermore, it is not uncommon to spot the hand of one scribe recording S2 revisions amid the work of the other two scribes, and occasionally other hands appearing recording S2 work amid the work of the principal scribes. S2 work recorded amid S1 work in Mark, Luke, and Luke, John is identifiable because it is recorded in ways that depart from the method that each scribe used to record S1 revisions. So in other words, did they do things in the methodology they used to record the things that make it clear that it is a later revision? Okay, that's what he's saying. That's what they're saying. S2 revisions recorded amid the work of Matthew are not easy to identify, again because of MT's unsystematic recording method. When we encounter a different hand amid MT's work, the likelihood of such work being M2 revision is strong. But when we encounter a passage revised by MT and then once again by him, it is not always possible to argue that the latter work falls into the S2 or stage 2 category. Stage 3 revisions are also identifiable when considering the New Testament portion of Bod 1602, according to Allen and Jacobs' quote. Stage 3 revisions comprise the third identifiable stage of the process associated with these annotations. In addition to S1 and S2 revisions recorded in the annotated Gospels, it is clear from collation with the AV, that's the authorized version, that revision of the Gospels was ongoing elsewhere. Such revision constitutes, then, evidence of stage 3 work. Exactly when this stage occurred for Luke, John, probably differs from when it occurred for Mark, Luke, or Matthew. Estimations derived from our collation argue that stage 1 and stage 2 revisions of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and Luke, John correspond to the AV in the amounts of 2/3, 3/4, and 5/6 respectively. All right, so what the heck does that mean? Okay, let's make sure we get what that means. So that means for Matthew here, they're saying that the stage 1 and 2 revisions for Matthew equal 2/3 of the final text of what? The AV. They're saying that the first and second stages for Mark, Luke represent 3/4 of the final text of the AV. And they're saying that stage 1 and 2 revisions for Luke, John represent 5/6 of the AV text. So, is everybody following those numbers? So that means, by and large, after stages 1 and 2, was the text set? By and large, was it set? So stage 3 revision, is it going to be wholesale or just finishing touches, so to speak? It's just going to be finishing touches. Look at the next sentence. If we judge the amount of work that the general meeting accomplished by Boyce's notes, it is possible that the stage 3 work from those portions annotated by Luke, John could have occurred as late as the time of the general meeting during the first 9 months of 1610. Okay? Now remember what the general meeting is. The general meeting is the meeting of final review, where the 12 guys review the text for the final time, late in the game in 1610. The thing is published when? 1611, right? So that would mean stage 10, or stage 10. Stage 3, theoretically, is happening when? 1610. If it happens in 1610, then this would be the result of the general what? Meeting. You'll see that, I'm confident, as we go through the examples we'll look at this week and next week, right? But the lesser states of the finished work found in the annotation of Mark, Luke, and especially Matthew, argue that stage 3 revisions for these two scribes must include more than 9 months of work of the general meeting in 1610. Stage 3 revisions for Matthew and Mark, Luke must also encompass other revisions being performed and recorded elsewhere in the leaves of this New Testament at about or perhaps just after the time that Matthew and Mark, Luke were recording work in 1608, 1609, but earlier than the 1610 work of the general meeting. So again, it depends what section you're talking about, okay? So this is a little bit of a sliding scale, but we can deduce some pretty general takeaways from the scope of the work and what is being done when. It is probable then that the revisions recorded by Matthew and Mark, Luke were combined with those of other parallel efforts into a version closer to the state that represented Luke, John's work, and then sent to the general meeting in 1610 in one of the three large Bibles spoken of in Rule 10. Okay, so what do we need to take from this? Number one, are there 3 scribes? The 3 scribes are annotating different sections, all right? There are 3 stages of revision that are evident. One being early, the committee work of this Oxford committee as they do their work, finishing sometime between late 1607, early 1608. There's a second stage that seems to date from, let me back up. In the work, there are 3 different types of things that are happening. There are substitutions, additions, and deletions, or any combination thereof as they are revising a given verse. Stage 2 work is happening probably in 1608. Stage 3 is happening later, depends on which portion you're talking about, right? When we compare the annotations found in Bod 1602 with the final product of 1611, the AV, we can see that this scribe, that about 2/3 of the work was done, 3/4 of the work was done, and 5/6 of the work was done by the time the annotations found in Bod 1602 were complete. You following that? Any questions about that? Makes perfect sense, so we'll move on, right? All right, thank you. Amen. All right. The ML Scribe. Now, look, we're going to look at only one scribe. The reason for that is you're already bored enough. You don't need me to go through the minutia of every scribe's handling of this. And plus, this scribe, Mark Luke, is the clearest and most definitive of how he is entering the annotations into the text. All right? And you'll see in a minute that Alan and Jacob say that if you can figure out how Mark Luke is operating, it's very easy to figure out what Luke John is doing. Matthew remains sort of the oddball in how he is entering. He doesn't seem to have any sort of real clear system that he's following the way the other two do. But if you can ascertain Mark Luke, Luke John will be pretty clear. Matthew remains sort of a wild card as far as understanding it. All right? So look at the next point. Regarding the length of the New Testament Gospels and the intricacies of the work being studied, we will only look in detail at the method of the Mark-Luke scribe. Regarding the Mark-Luke scribe, Alan and Jacob state the following, quote, "The method of Mark-Luke is the clearest. Once understood, the method of L.J., Luke John, is relatively easy to follow, after which the method of Matthew, with its uncertainties, also becomes apparent." So in other words, if you're going to understand what's going on, you want to go here first. If you understand what Mark Luke is doing, you can easily figure out what Luke John is doing. And then once you've understood those two, you can pretty much roundabout figure out what he did. Does that make sense? Okay. Since Alan and Jacobs believe that a consideration of the methodology of Mark Luke scribe unlocks the practice and methodology of the other two, we will focus our gaze on the Mark Luke scribe as a case study. Along the way, we will try to note any principal differences between the other two scribes as well. Okay, now, when we get into this, there's going to be some weird spellings. Okay, Sylvia wrote me about this, and I did not have time to get back to her. We will have to double check maybe some of these, but most of the weird spellings were weird because of the way they were spelled here in the source that I'm quoting from. All right, so if there's something that we need to double check, let's note it and I'll double check it. But some of the awkwardness that we're going to encounter in spelling is related to what I'm quoting. All right, so let's look at the first quote. Mark Luke uses one of three techniques to record S1 revisions, so stage 1 revisions, depending on whether he is recording substitutions, deletions, or additions. Luke 2:12 illustrates Mark Luke's sequence. Now, what I'm going to do, guys, is I have provided the images. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to affix this to the screen here on the TV so that we can zoom in on that and make reference to what we're talking about in the notes. Okay? So we're talking about this verse right here, Luke 2:12. See it? Is it heavily annotated? If you look at the image, it's verse 12, heavily annotated in this verse. So let's look at what all this means. All right? Luke 2:12 illustrates Mark Luke's substitution sequence, see figure 1, which I have right here. Okay? First, Mark Luke underlines with a single continuous line each passage in the verse that is to be replaced by a substitution. So let's look at that. He underlines this. Take this for a sign. See how it's underlined? Yep. Okay? And child swaddled laid. Right here. Child swaddled laid. So we actually need quotation mark wrong, the front of that where it says child. Okay? So he underlines those. Second, Mark Luke inserts a superscript Greek letter before the first, should say word, of each underlined passage. A new for take. So let's look right here. See? He's underlined this. You see this superscript Greek letter? Right there by the word what? Take. Okay, read on. He knew before the word take and a chi before child. So right here, you see that superscript letter. Okay? So he's underlined it and then he's put a superscript letter there. So that he's working off of a 1602 Bishop's Bible. Okay? At times, but not in this verse, Mark Luke will insert a caret beneath the superscript letter to call attention to it. So sometimes there's a little caret that he'll put down here, pointing up at the superscript letter, but he doesn't do that in this particular verse. Third, Mark Luke records in the margin, opposite the underlined passage, a second Greek letter matching the superscript one in the text. So here's the underline, take this for a sign, here is the superscript. Then you go to the margin, you see the same superscript Greek letter here in the margin. So what is very clear what he's doing. He's canceling out this and saying, okay, see the margin for what? Correct. The alternative reading. Does everybody see what he's doing? Okay? Mark Luke followed the Greek alphabet in selecting matching pairs of letters. If he finished the alphabet, as in Luke 2:23, he usually begins the alphabet again. Okay? So I'm going to scroll down here in verse 23, in this same section, he's going to run out, he's exhausted the Greek alphabet. So normally what he does is he starts over with the first letter of the Greek alphabet. Sometimes though he'll use another symbol or something different, okay? But normally he'll just start over again at the beginning of the Greek alphabet so you could follow your way down through a given page. Is everybody following that? Okay? Such is the case for Luke 2 verses 49 through 52. See figure 2. I'm not going to go to figure 2 at the moment. Okay? ML uses astrological signs here. So sometimes he uses other symbols instead of the Greek alphabet. Now, after the Greek letter or sign written in the margin, ML writes the substitution revision meant to replace the underlined passage. So again, here he's underlined, take this for a sign. He's got the Greek character here, it tells you to go to the margin where he has the alternative reading. Alright? After the new, at Luke 2:12, he writes, this shall be a sign unto you. Now somebody open your King James Bible and go to Luke chapter 2 verse 12. Go to Luke chapter 2 verse 12. You already have it, Mike? How does it read?
And this shall be a sign unto you.
And this shall be a sign unto you. So what are you looking at right there in that verse? You are looking at them revising the verse to the exact reading that showed up where? In the finished product of 1611. There is zero doubt whatsoever that that's what they're doing here. He has identified that phrase. He substituted a different phrase in there. And the same thing is true in the second half of the verse. Let's read on, okay? This shall be a sign unto you. After the chi, he writes, babe wrapped in swaddling clothes, lying. So that was a cancellation of this phrase, child swaddled laid. You follow this out to the margin, babe wrapped, it says babe wrapped in swaddling clothes, lying. Mike, what does it say in the King James?
Ye shall find the babe wrapped in swaddling clothes, lying in a manger.
So is that substitution the exact text that ends up in the King James Bible? Okay? And then later, it says later revised, lying, maybe the spelling he's talking about there. Now watch, top page 4. The fourth and final step that ML uses to complete the substitution is a strikethrough line. A single continuous line crossing out each portion of the underlined text. The line confirms that the proposed substitution written in the margin has been approved. Thus far, the future AV revision to be replaced at the underlined 1602 text. Luke 2, verse 12, now revised reads, and this shall be a sign unto you, ye shall find the babe wrapped in swaddling clothes, lying in a manger. Laying in a manger, sorry. So that's what he was talking about there. So they have lying here. It ends up as what? Laying. But you can see what happens. So let's follow this through, okay? Is this text underlined? Signifying it's going to be substituted. Is there a caret or is there a Greek letter put here into the text interlinearly, directing your attention to the margin, and then you find the substituted reading in the margin? If that reading is accepted, then he does a what? He crosses it out, indicating that from here forth, what is the reading going to be? The marginal substitution. I'm telling you guys, I might be the only dork ever alive that gets excited about this stuff, but what you're looking at is them actually what? Changing it. This is totally demystifying what happened. So many people think that these guys just sat in a room with a blank piece of paper, and from on high, God just somehow teleported the text to them and onto paper. That did not happen. They are revising the bishop's text. Okay? So let's stop there. So all we've looked at so far is a substitution. Now, does everybody see, though, how Mark Luke, the Mark Luke scribe, is he using a very orderly, systematic way of recording the changes? If there's a proposed substitution, he underlines it. Now, I think we're going to look at one. I got so much swimming in my head right now. Sometimes there's a proposed substitution, and then it's not struck through, meaning the substitution was later on what? Overruled. You following that? Any questions before we move on to page 5? So, to confirm that this is in fact the substitution sequence of the Mark Luke scribe, Allen and Jacobs encourage their readers to study the annotations in chapter 2, verse 19. So that's on the same page. So I'm going to scroll down to that. And here is verse 19 right here. All right, so let's go through their statement about it. The study of Luke 2:19 reveals that the use of the strikethrough line in Luke 2:12 is the last step of the substitution sequence. One verse in Luke 2:19 contains the first 3 steps of the sequence, but does not have the strikethrough line. Instead, this passage deviates from the substitution sequence. The proposed revision written in the margin has itself been canceled. At Luke 2:19, the phrase pondered them has been underlined once. So let's look at 2:19 right here. You see pondered them. See how it's underlined once? Okay? And a superscript chi, now voided, has been written before pondered. So you see there's a character here that's been crossed out. Right here, at the head of the underlined word. That would have sent you over here to the margin. Okay? With the matching chi written in the margin, followed by the phrase pondering them, right here, has now also voided. So has this been crossed out? Mm-hmm. So what does that tell you? It's not accepted. That it was not accepted, right? So at first they mark this and they say, we need to change this and we're going to change pondered them to what? Pondering them. Okay? At some point, some discussion was held and said, nah, we don't like that. So the substitution was canceled here, canceled the margin, and what? So the marginal substitution is actually struck through, not what? Not the text in the verse that's been underlined. Okay? The logic here is obvious. Pondering them has been proposed to replace the underlying 1602 phrase pondered them. But for some reason, the proposed reading has been rejected. The 1602 phrasing is to remain in the AV, but with one slight revision. The pronoun them, instead of being printed in small Roman type, is to be printed as the rest of the verse in black letter type, hence the insertion of the abbreviation AG for Angelus or Angelize, which is, we would say italics now, within square brackets directly above the pronoun. See this? They're saying that should be what? So Mike, look at your Bible, verse 19, is that in italics?
Yes, it is.
It is in italics. Did they just say that should be italicized? Okay. The rejection of this S1 substitution revision is evident. Thus, the S2 revision present in these annotations, and thus the revision of these annotations. So I think what they're saying is that decision to italicize that is an S2 what? Revision. Okay. Now, let's just finish this, see if they tell us why. I can't remember if they do or not. The progress, the progress for the work can thus be summarized. 1602, pondered them. S1, substitution revision, pondering them. S2 revision, do they cancel the S1 revision and retain this?
Yes, but that should be italicized.
And then, and they make a note that this should be what? Italicized. So, M2's use of the Greek alphabet in Luke 2:19 also reveals that he does not complete the fourth step of the substitution sequence, use of the strikethrough line, such as in Luke 2:12, to make the final revision. Until he has recorded all proposed S1 revisions for the Mark Luke text, and the revisions have been reviewed as the rules directed. For if Mark Luke had voided the proposed revision pondering them, and the letter chi immediately after recording them, then he would have come to record the revision at Luke 2:31. He would have been free to use the chi again. Instead, at Luke 2:21, he uses the letter p's. The Mark Luke scribe uses the Greek alphabet in the record of S1 substitutions, reflects the same pattern at enough other places in Mark Luke's work to validate the logic here applied to Luke 2:19. So, what do we see? So let's look at this change in the same verse. Here we have the same thing, right? Was this underlined?
Yep.
Was there a note to go over here? And was that revision accepted? So, Mike, let's read that verse. Read verse 19 the way it is in the King James.
But Mary kept all these things and pondered them in her heart.
The original verse that they're revising, but Mary kept all these sayings and pondered them in her heart. So if we look at that verse, have they switched? This says what? These things?
These things.
And pondered them, italics, right?
Them in italics in her heart.
So are we looking here at the exact annotations to conform that verse into what's in your Bible in front of you? Okay? All right. Any questions?
What's the significance of italicizing now?
So, the italicizing represents the adding of an English word that is necessary to complete the thought in English, for which there is no underlining Greek word. That's essentially what it means. All right? But you'll notice that the bishops, hang on. The bishops did not originally have that in italics, did it? For them.
No.
Doesn't seem to be. So let's go to the next one. It is, yeah, I agree, it is a little different type. It's not very clear though. So they are saying that definitely needs to be in a different type than the rest of it. Okay? And they called it was called different. Today we would call it italics. I forget what they called it back then, but it was
Anglicized or something?
anglicized, and they would have just called it a different typeface. They would not have necessarily called it italics. All right, think we got time to look at a little bit more. The passage from Luke 2, pictured above, also contains further evidence of S2 revision at Luke 2:13. So let's go, I'll call that up. And now, okay, 2:13 is right there, all right? In the margin, opposite Luke 2:13, another sort of deviation from the substitution process occurs, which reveals the presence of S2 revision. S2 meaning what? Stage 2, right? A second revision written above the voided substitution. So, here's verse 13, okay? So, they have marked heavenly soldiers, I believe this says, for substitution, all right? The 1602 phrase, heavenly soldiers, was first revised to read the heavenly army. So, do we have it underlined?
Yes.
Is there a character here indicating to go here? The heavenly, and then you'll notice there's a bunch of what? There's a word here that's been crossed out. Okay? The revisers of the proposed substitution agreed that the 1602 phrase, heavenly soldiers, should be changed because ML has struck through the underlined 1602 phrase. So, following his sequence, he's underlined it, he's noted it, he's put the alternative reading where? In the margin. Has he done the cancellation line through the text? Okay, let's read on. But apparently, reviewers raised a question about the use of the noun army, which the Oxford New Testament Company had put forward as part of the stage 1 substitution. Top page 6. The reviewers suggest in its place the noun host. Vision remain untouched. The AV reads heavenly what? So somebody went to the margin, crossed off army, and wrote what? I know you can't read it, but it says host right here. Mike, read that verse for me if you would in the King James.
And suddenly there was with the angel a multitude of the heavenly host, praising God and saying.
So do we see the exact thing happening there that results in the reading that's in your King James Bible? So here we see S1 revision, stage 1 revision, and then do we see later stage 2 revision? Is everybody following that? There are other interlinear alterations in ML substitution sequence that bespeak S2 revisions as a result of the review process. Because these two deviations from Luke's substitution sequence that indicate, these two deviations from Luke's substitution sequence that indicate the presence of S2 revision consequent to the reviewing process, there are other sorts of deviations from the sequence that indicate S2 revision. A third one involved the recording of manuscript annotations interlinearly in the 1602 text rather than in the margin opposite the text in Luke 2:38. Now, I don't know. Let me try to find the other image if I had that image. I think I do. Yes, right here. Do you have it?
Yeah.
Okay. Luke 2:38 is typical. ML has underlined one of the phrases at the same. So here it is. See how it's underlined? At the same. And has also struck through it with a single line. So you can see it's canceled with the single line. He has written above the canceled phrase, in at that. Not only does this interlinear position of the phrase, in at that, suggest that it was an S2 revision, but also the recording method of the phrase does not use Greek letters as signs to locate revisions in the text. So, this has been underlined and has a substitution phrase been written above it. Does it break from the normal flow of what the scribe was doing as he was entering the work into the text? Okay? So this bespeaks a stage 2 what? Revision. So let's look at the next paragraph. Other evidence in Luke 2:38 argues that the interlinear revision in at that to be an S2 revision. That evidence is the presence of yet another fourth deviation that indicates S2 revision. In this instance, both the proposed substitution written in the margin at the 16:0 text to be replaced by the substitution are struck through, thus creating a shortened verse. In Luke 2:38, the phrase "upon them" has first been revised to, and this doesn't make sense. I'm gonna have to check this. This is, I think, "upon them" is underlined, and there's a, so I'm not sure
That top struck out.
this here. Make a note to have to check that line, that's not reading right to me. The underlining of the pronoun, the use of the letter rho written before the underlined pronoun, the writing of a second row in the margin followed by the insertion of the pronoun them. In a careful print hand, and the abbreviation Rome with square brackets following the pronoun. So that's this, obviously. These constitute the first 3 steps of the substitution revision. ML has indicated clearly that the AV is to print the pronoun them. Oh, that's what this is. To print it in Roman type. So in other words, that the pronoun them is the same situation as what we saw before, right? So this is a stage 1 change. Remember the first time it was a stage 2. So they're saying that word them needs to be in Roman what? Type. So Mike, in your Bible, look at verse 38, is the word them in italics?
No.
Uh-oh. It's not?
Spake of him to all them, that them is not in italics.
And why is it not in italics? Because we can see that it's canceled. So is the change originally noted canceled? Okay? But the 4th step of the substitution sequence, when it came time to approve the substitution in the margin, by striking through the underlined 1602 text, a further S2 revision occurs. At this stage, the whole prepositional phrase appears to have been rejected for the proposed substitution, and the margin is crossed through together with the 2 words in the deleted text. So in other words, is this crossed out?
Yeah. Yes.
So are they deleting this change? So when you look at your Bible and the them is not in Roman type or italics, it's because the stage 1 revision has been what? Canceled. Are you following that? Okay? Delise, short for deletion, I'm assuming. One in the text over the phrase, and the other in the margin confirms this decision. I think it's talking about that. I'm not sure where it is there, but... So the revision has proceeded as follows. 1602, upon them. Substitution 1, revision, upon them should be in italics. Stage 2 revision, removes it and puts it back to the way it was. Turning again to the interlinear revision, in at that in Luke 2:38, it is likely that at the same time that the S2 revision canceled the substitution upon them, the interlinear S2 revision in at that was also added. Upon further review, only one of these S2 revisions was approved, that being cancellation of the prepositional phrase upon them. S3 revision rejected in part the addition of the interlinear revision in at that, preferring instead to read in that. Here are the stages of the work that preceded. Now before we do that, Mike, Read for me verse 38 for me if you would.
And she, coming in that instant, gave thanks likewise unto the Lord, and spake of him to all them that looked for redemption in Jerusalem.
So let's go to page 7. So the 1611 had at the same. Stage 1, unrevised. Stage 2, in at that. Stage 3 then is going to remove what? At. So how does it read, Mike, in that part?
In that instant.
So is a third revision happening where they remove this? And read it again.
And she, coming in that instant, gave thanks.
So is there a stage 3 revision to remove the word at from this proposed change?
Yeah.
Okay. A fifth sort of deviation. Okay, we're really pressed. How close am I to being done?
Yeah. 11 pages.
Not close at all. All right. So what we're going to do is we're just going to stop there, and I'm going to make a decision about. I think we need to finish going through Mark, Luke. All that we've looked at so far has only been one kind of revision, and that's a what? Substitution. We haven't even looked at additions and what? Deletions. Okay? So we're pretty close to the end of the hour here. Are there any questions about this?
I don't understand why they took the word "at" out of there.
I can't answer that. I don't know. But they obviously what? They obviously did. The evidence is objective that at some point they decided they didn't need the at and they got rid of it. So that would be a change that was made then after this was produced. So is that a late change? Is that a later change? Stage 3 changes are later. They are often too. But look, guys, we're only looking at look at all the revision happening in just one. All of these examples have been from Luke 2. Is there massive revision going on? I mean, massive in the sense of number. Are they taking their job seriously to take the bishop's text, compare it against the original, the Greek text, look at it and look at other English Bibles, and decide what the reading should be? Okay? So what we're going to do, we'll plan on, I'm going to have to reorganize a few things in the notes, but we will come back, and I do want to finish looking at substitutions and additions for this so that we can kind of complete this out. I think it's important that we understand what Mark Luke is doing, and then from understanding what Mark Luke is doing, we can really understand what Luke John did and what Matthew did as far as these scribes and how they're entering the annotations into the text. All right? But we are right at the time where we need to be quitting. And anybody got any questions or comments real quick, or we can take them after as we pack up the equipment?